Rick, right off the top, we've got North Korea back. They've now launched for the second time this week anti-aircraft missiles, and to me, it just underscores one. We can talk about the North Korea issue and how that's been unraveling since this administration came into office. The Trump administration left, but two, the idea that the world and these bad actors are flexing their muscles right now.
Yeah, they're testing this Biden administration, and let's be very clear. There is a difference between a threat of military action and a credible threat of military action. And that's what we're seeing now, not only with North Korea, but Iran. I would put Venezuela into that category. There are a whole bunch of bad actors who are looking at what happened in Afghanistan, the fact that the Biden administration is proud that it got only 90% of the Americans out, that there was not a good response as the Taliban recalibrated, and they're seeing, hey, look, this is an administration that gave the Russians a pipeline, that is doing nothing about the buildup of 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. And so Kim Jong-un looks at the messaging here and says, I should start testing. This is very dangerous for Americans.
You mentioned, Rick, just now Iran, and I want to talk about that for a moment because, I've always been concerned about the Chinese, Iranian, Russian, Syrian relationship as it relates to Iran. And it seems to me that as long as the United States is staying at a table, it doesn't have to be the table, but a table negotiating with Iran, under these circumstances, it's showing a sign of weakness. And then with North Korea flexing its muscles and rattling their sabers, it seems like to me we're in a situation where, despite the administration's attempt to try to say, oh, the United States back in foreign policy, we've destroyed our relationship with the French. It just seems to be much, much worse.
We've talked about this in the past, but the Biden administration and our Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, talk a lot about diplomacy being back. And the reality is that they like consensus. They want the rest of the world to be pleased with them. They want the rest of the world to sign off on their policy. And so it becomes the lowest common denominator of policy. This is the danger of sitting down with Iran, is when we ask other countries who do not share the same threat assessment as we do to somehow come up with a joint policy on Iran. It's a real bad sign for the United States and for Israel.
Ambassador Grenell, I want to ask you something. You said something that I think that's really interesting, and that is that the current administration likes consensus, and especially I wrote down that you said they want the world to be pleased with them. In other words, we the United States, want the world to be happy with us and pleased with us and content with us. And doesn't that put our security and our future at risk when all we're looking out to do is to, and I'm going to use the word, appease the world and make the world happy?
There's no question about that, because you can use the word appease, and I think it's appropriate, because what you're really doing is having consensus, meeting in the middle possibly, or at least giving up on your America First policy. The opposite of America First is consensus. And while consensus sounds like a great term and sounds like we're all going to hug it out, I can tell you I spent 8 years at the UN. Every country there, 193 countries, every country fights for themselves. When they negotiate, it's Germany first, it's France first, it's the UK first, it's who's ever on the Security Council negotiating. They put themselves first when trying to come up with consensus.
Rick, the politics of this that's going on right now too. I mean, we had the generals testifying this week. That we've got this budget issues, but the Biden team, they don't seem to be really engaging on this. It's not like we get the report about North Korea, but it's in the back of the news. We get it's almost hard to figure out what's going on in the world because it's crisis to crisis. And I think now they're starting to use, especially like the Washington-style crisis of a budget negotiation and infrastructure talks. If people can focus on that, and maybe they get bored, and that's not so interesting, instead of focusing on these issues that really are important.
I think you hit it there, Jordan. They're using distraction politics right now to create some space. And let's also be honest, they're feeling the heat and panicking, but they don't even have the mainstream media breathing down their neck. No. They just know that the world is in crisis, that things are not going well, and they're not getting the positive press from the places where they used to. So this is the Democratic Party, the progressives, they're not used to having scrutiny from the media. We conservatives are. We can go and take the hits and keep on moving forward when we know the policy is right. The Democrats, they really have the opposite problem, thin skin.
You mean you and I and Jordan were used to taking hits? I think that might be true. Like 4 years of clobber is more like it. But you know what? We withstood it. Here's the thing that I'm finding interesting, though, geopolitically, and that is I think this instability, this is my view, Rick, the instability that this creates for the rest of the world and for countries that are in a developmental process that are relying on foreign aid, it's got to be disconcerting to them to see this kind of instability.
There's no question about it. I mean, I would go so far as to say that the Europeans are feeling like, wait a minute, this is a wreck over in the United States, whether it's France or Germany, traditional Europe. And of course, the Balkans, Eastern Europe, they're just flabbergasted. They cannot believe that America is in this position. The Middle East, of course, prefers Trump. Let's be honest.
No question. Last question here, because we're running out of time, but you were the ambassador to Germany. The German election, what's your read on the situation?
Don't count the Christian Democrats out yet. The socialists came on top. They're going to have to hobble together a coalition government, which means the only way that it works is the FDP, which is the libertarians, think of the Rand Paul types, are going to have to join with the socialists. I don't see that happening, but maybe they're desperate to get into the government and they will do it. Time will tell.
All right. Thanks, Rick. We appreciate it.